No, but I'm so before. I'm so good. You already know I've seen all that.
This is all on tape. This is all on tape.
Oh, really?
All right, everybody. Welcome. Sorry. I need my yes, exactly. Welcome to the panel Social E-Textiles. So this is a really lovely and exciting panel. We have three wonderful people who will be presenting some of the work that they've done, specifically Emily, Lara, and Anna. So they're going to present they're each going to present for a little while, and then we're going to open it up for a group discussion. And this, I know the chairs are arranged in a presentation style format, but this is a group discussion. We want everybody to engage in asking questions. And yeah, so I guess with that introduction, we'll go ahead and kick off with Emily. And before we start, I guess I would just like to say, E-Textiles has many dimensions to it. There are a lot of different elements and different parts of the practice. And this is really about examining social in a variety of contexts in different ways and sort of how we bring different communities with different abilities and different perspectives into our practice. And so with that, to you.
Thank you very much. So hello, thank you for coming to our panel. It's really good to see you all here. I'm going to talk a little bit, just for my part, of the discussions about my PhD work. So I've been working with people who are blind or visually impaired to make their own e-textile objects that are very much based on touch and personal association. But to begin with, I just want to talk a bit about my background, really. So I guess my own sort of personal practice as an artist with e-textiles is very much participatory. So from doing workshops with kids, teaching them how to work with the sensors, and how you can do things like weaving, or with capacitive touch sensing, to doing school projects, where maybe kids make like an installation using Arduinos and laser cutting. And other projects too, where I've worked in schools making e-textile sculptures, where children have then actually added little embroideries which represent something personal to them about their environment, something they love about their school or their city. And for me, I guess the whole subject of like textiles as outreach, empowerment, and well-being is very important. It's very much related to my own work. But I think it's all just very actually important in the field, and something which is definitely growing. So I just wanted to touch a bit on projects that have been quite influential to me, actually, I guess, as an artist, but also a researcher. So, for example, this research project here, where actually the researchers worked with young people who were in danger of dropping out of school, or actually already had, to actually get them to learn, I guess, STEM subjects, but also creativity. And it was a group of girls. And the idea was to actually get them to learn these skills, but to really sort of, I guess, like, create a passion with it as well and see what they wanted to make. And then an artist and academic called Misha Cardenas, who did a project called Autonet, which I think people might be quite familiar with actually, where she worked with a group of women that was very much looking at ideas around gender, so transgender people as well, and actually working towards performances using e-textiles, but actually going through the procedure of making a wearable that you could actually use if you were a woman or someone who identifies as being a woman. If you got into trouble, you could then communicate with other people wearing these wearables, say, across the city. So to create a community around it and actually creating empowerment and looking at ideas around self-defense as well. And then actually, I guess with my own work, which I consider to be quite participatory, the work by Sarah Ketley, AL, at Nottingham-Trent, with an Internet of Soft Things. So this is very much working with participants with mental health issues, where they work to create e-textile objects, not only to learn the technical skills and to grow confidence, but also they use a lot of psychotherapy techniques, where the participants are encouraged to reflect week by week on what they're doing, how they're feeling personally whilst making these objects, and also connecting to other people. With my own work, it's very much about making through touch. So how can we look at working with the participants in a way that's quite tactile? So maybe not relying just on things like sewing or stuff that can be quite fiddly, but things like weaving and felt making as well to create objects. And I think when we think about e-textiles, we often think about things which are quite visual, often have LEDs in them, but there's so many other things that we can use, like the actual feel of the fabric itself, or maybe working with sensors, or working with like haptics and vibration, maybe sound output. So the first project I did this was a few years ago. This was before I took my PhD, and myself and my supervisor developed a series of quite open approach workshops using weaving and using conducting materials within the weave. So the participants were building these little fabric sensors, I guess, that you could just hook up to an Arduino board, and the data would feed into pure data, and then you get different sound output, but it was very much to open conversations about textiles and how they could be used more. So they also made this little tactile object as well. And then one thing which I guess is quite inherent to my work, but not only as an artist but also with my PhD, has been actually looking at ideas around participatory design, so working with people where we're very much making together. So I've like this idea of mutual learning, where I learn from them as much as they learn from me. And for anyone who's not maybe that familiar with participatory design, Gale defines it as participatory design approaches seek to include future users in most parts of the design process, even as co-designers. Ideally, users at many levels participate so that change can be shaped from different perspectives. And then, focusing on the PhD work I've been doing recently, I've been running series of participatory design workshops with 2 different communities of people with visual impairment. Some who have done crafting loads in the past, some who haven't really done any, and they've been working towards making their own textile objects, but making them very personal and looking at this idea of, okay, when we feel a piece of material, what's it make us think of? Does it bring up some kind of personal memory or story, or maybe even doing making in the past, either as a child or for some of these participants before they lost their sight, because this is something that's been quite important to them. They felt they could make, and now they've been feeling they can find techniques which are a bit more, I guess, tangible and don't rely on vision. So we've been hacking these little re-recordable devices to make sound recordings which are associated with their memories or stories. Making circuits with Paillard, because if you are visually impaired, maybe it is a bit more tricky to maybe avoid short circuiting. So this insulates conductive threads so you can make a circuit quite successfully. I've got some pieces in the exhibition as well, which I'm going to look at later if you'd like to, which can use these techniques. And then making e-textile buttons as well. And so within the process, we've been very much looking at these materials, discussing them, and actually trying to, rather than just be like, oh, I think this is a piece of cotton or a piece of silk or what have you, actually be like, oh, this feels like snakeskin, or oh, this feels like a jacket I used to wear. So very much trying to get to this deep thinking of association with the materials rather than what they are literally. And then the participants have been bringing in garments from home, maybe objects which are textile-based and telling us their stories. So, for example, the participant on the left, she brought this in and it's her birthday dress. She wears it on Valentine's Day every year, which is also her birthday. And it's got a lot of happy memories from her, but it feels really exquisite as well. And as we pass this around the table and all the workshops, we had a lot of lovely discussions about this. Everyone wants to know what recipe like and what it feels like this. And then another lady actually won a couple of rosettes for art competitions. So this is one on the right. And it was quite interesting. She didn't quite know which competition she'd won this for because she has no vision and they were different colours, but it was more the act of kind of bringing it and sharing it with us and telling the story. And so this is just kind of showing some of the crafting techniques we've been trying in the workshops, because also it's been about what kind of making is tactile and accessible, what kind of stuff can people do with maybe not much vision or no vision. So making tube yarn wires by weaving conductive thread through the middle of them and then putting fasteners on the end so you can make connections easily. Doing things like finger knitting, felting, and then doing weaving as well. So it's very much looking at, okay, what kind of crafting techniques can be used by this user group, I guess. And then what they've done, the output of this has been these beautiful wall hangings which contain their personal stories or memories and interact when you press the buttons. Or the one participant, Graham, which wanted to make a cushion because she wanted to be able to hug something and she wanted to comfort her, and she was very adamant about this, and that was quite wonderful actually. And when you hug it, it plays an audio recording of her singing "You Will Never Walk Alone," which is a song which makes her really happy. I just want to show you this video of one of the participants talking about their work. So I'm going to turn on the speaker. about that? Yeah, cool.
My piece is about the sea. This, yes, this is the sea, seabirds. Now it goes on forever. And we have a lighthouse.
Foghorn.
Yes. And then we have a trawler, fishing trawler, with a very big fishing net. And it's sending out this
And you've been in the area.
Excellent, thank you very much.
So I think with that participant in particular, what was quite lovely was as she was making her work, she had this kind of realization of, oh, all of my work is to do with the sea, so she does a lot of work in her spare time, and her granddad actually used to work on fishing trawlers, so from having conversations, looking at what was she interested in, what was she passionate about, and what does she want to use as her subject matter, we sort of came to this, and she very much sort of led the process of making this piece with us as her artist assistant when she wanted help, I guess, really. But it was something that was very personal to her. And then actually with one of the series of user studies, we had a showcase at the end where the participants shared their work with each other, and we sort of had a little party, and just kind of taking that time to actually reflect and to talk about the work and to actually demonstrate how it works as well. I think it was quite empowering for the participants and very enjoyable. So as well as sort of trying to answer my research questions about materials and does this actually evoke, do textiles evoke personal stories or associations, it is also, I guess my work is very much kind of going towards the idea of empowerment and well-being and very much just looking at the dynamic of the group and what we get from doing this kind of work and what they get as well. So yes, and I think I will leave it there because I'm at 10 minutes.
Oh, thank you.
Hello everyone. So I'm going to start the presentation right here. So this is a musical interface that I made. That's a glove. It's an Instructable on the Instructables.com platform, which is a platform where people can share their projects, their step-by-step tutorials, so other people can learn and make projects. This also has a lot of links to other glove musical interfaces and controllers, some of which some people who are participating in the summer camp have made. So the hand has become a very interesting interface because of the articulation and I think some of the connotations. So someone in New Jersey, a woman, Dr. Courtney Bolden, who teaches a mechatronics course at a public university in New Jersey, America. She works also for a nonprofit organization called Safe Passages, and she's been working with this family who has an 11-year-old girl who has cerebral palsy. So she has very limited motor functions, and she saw this glove and reached out to me and wanted me to create an interface to help this girl speak, because she had lost a lot of the functions of her vocal cords. She had very limited movements, and so this inspired her to reach out to me. And sadly enough, I wasn't able to do it because I had a very busy schedule at the time, but I was about to start teaching a class at a university called Wearable and Soft Interactions, and so I asked her if I could then open it up instead to students and have it become a part of a design challenge. So instead of just getting one mind, she could get multiple minds, and there could be a set amount of time and resources that students could then take to develop an interface for this girl, Sarah. And she was happy to do it because she was a teacher as well, so she was really open to the idea. And the class is taught just to give some context to it, it's 3 and 4 year students taking a bachelor's degree, and they're from all different backgrounds: furniture design, industrial design, interaction design, and I try to get as many textile and fashion design students as possible as well, but that tends to be a difficult thing. So then the project Sarah's glove came into fruition, and this is Sarah and her mother. So we set up a schedule to do video chats because they were in New Jersey and we were in San Francisco, so we were actually across the country from each other, thousands of miles away, so that was an interesting challenge for us to try to communicate with them. And we had the students do multiple prototypes and ship them over, and they gave us live feedback through video chat. They were very excited because e-textiles is soft, and that was really important to them. They needed something that Sarah could wear because sometimes her physical movements would become arrested and they would become quite spastic and they would be uncontrollable, or involuntary. So sometimes her hands would brush against her face and whatnot, so that was really important. That's what really drew them to, I think, wanting specifically an e-textile interface. So this is one of the students speaking with Sarah speaking with Sarah's mother more so, and then also Courtney, who I had on the other side of New Jersey, or in New Jersey. And you can see an interface that was being tested. And this was really important for the students because the students in the university were very used to getting a brief, like a profile written on paper for them to design with. And instead of having an actual interaction with a real person, which is very counterintuitive when you think of people designing user-centric objects. You would think that they would be working with someone in particular, but that's actually not usually the case, at least in the institution where I'm teaching at the moment. So it was a good challenge for the students to come up with their own questions and get these communication skills with somebody that I think that they wouldn't necessarily have interaction with in the first place. So I'm just going to share with you some of the projects that the students made that were using e-textile. So through observing Sarah and speaking with the mother and also speaking with Courtney, they were able to discern some intentional movements that Sarah was capable of, and since the family also specifically asked for a glove, then they went to focus on that design as the main interface. So here, this is an interface that was whipped together as a first prototype. They worked in teams, by the way, of teams of like 2 to 3 students. And here you can see they're working with flex sensors that detect the bend of fingers and the different colors of lights, which will then become sound later on. So the goal was to give Sarah a voice. So this was going to trigger specific words and specific phrases that they were learning from Sarah. And things were always evolving too, which I thought was really interesting. Like having this conversation between the students and Sarah. They learned like what her favorite colors were and like that she loved hearts, and she also loved painting and drawing. So she had a hard time holding on to a pen. She wasn't able to grasp very well, and she wasn't able to exert a lot of pressure with her finger, which was another reason why the family was looking into e-textiles, because they thought of something of being like soft and easier to the touch rather than a mechanical button that was made out of plastics and metals. And this is another, so the prototype that you just saw, this ended up being the final prototype. You can see that the speaker is attached to it then, so the sound will be coming out of that. And then this is just a photo of the final prototype being tested, the mother putting it on Sarah. So this is just yet another example of a prototype that a team made. And the interesting thing that I found was that I was actually quite worried in the beginning. So all the students were designing for this one person, Sarah, but they actually came up with all different ideas and like different approaches to do this. even though the brief was a glove. And some of them did focus on the index finger. I think that was pretty popular, but this one is, for example, also exploring the movement of a wrist. So the students learning in textiles also allowed them to prototype interfaces that weren't wearable. And nice, flat, low profile. This is using a joystick kind of design, using the finger as a joystick to get the left, right, up and down motion. You can see different LEDs lighting up based on where the finger touches, which pad the finger touches. And then this is yet another prototype that the same group made in the same week, and they were using the stylus as a joystick idea since they learned that Sarah still needed assistance to use a pencil, but she really enjoyed writing and painting. So they really wanted to use that and extend that and see if they could use the pen holding itself as a way for her to possibly learn how to communicate. So it was really easy for the students to prototype with these e-textile materials because they really just needed a hand needle and some glue and some scissors and fabric, and they were able to whip up these, really rapidly prototype. And so this is yet another example of the joystick design, and this looks more like a traditional joystick design. And again, this was made of foam, which was something that Sarah would rest her wrist on because she had a hard time stabilizing her wrist. So not only gripping the pencil, but also she needed some stability here as well, so she could lift it off of the desk while she was writing. So here, the softness of that foam is really important. And then these are capacitive sensing buttons. And who here is familiar with e-textiles? Actually, just said, yeah, okay. So quite a number of you. So conductive fabric, you guys have worked with before, so that's not going to be a foreign thing. So capacitive sensing is being able to just sense the touch, but also proximity as well sometimes, which was really important because since Sarah couldn't do pressure very well, she couldn't apply a lot of pressure. So this was a prototype that students made using capacitive. Thank you. So those were different words that they learned that Sarah would want to communicate. So one was bathroom, one was suction, because she often needed to have a suction tube, like suction out her mouth, so she wouldn't choke on the liquids that would start to pool in it. So thank you was another one, and I forget what the other one was, but the fabric was quite nice in the soft material because Sarah also couldn't see extremely well, so they were seeing if just the texture of the fabric, or they did imprints of the different words here that they were able to press into the foam. And the fabric conformed really nicely over these buttons to see if she could, instead of having to see them, that she could feel them out to know which ones that she was touching, rather than just the sound output as well. And this is just another quick example of students using different textures of fabrics to differentiate between different buttons here. And this is a prototype that was sent to Sarah. She had a very limited range of movement, and so it was a challenge to really observe and to have her test all of these things while she was across the country. But they made really great videos for us, and so this is testing if the buttons are too close together, and you can see that they just stacked fabric on top of itself so they could actually make it as low or as high as they wanted. So that was a nice way for them to quickly iterate on the height of that so they could show us which height worked best through video. And from this test this was the final prototype, actually, so this was, I think, the second prototype. And they were playing with this modular aspect as well of the buttons, which was important for them for testing on the other side so they could get as much feedback on placement as possible. And then they ended up with this smaller design. And I think this is a video too. So just being able to prototype on different scales, I think, was really important for them. This laid across Sarah's wheelchair, and she was able to put the buttons wherever she needed them to be. Right, so this is a piece that doesn't have any electronics in it at all, but it was to help her have a grip on the pencil because she needed her mother to hold the hand around the pencil still so she could actually, because she didn't have that muscle to have the force around the stylus herself. And this actually ended up being very helpful for her, and we were able to give her whatever it was that she wanted to keep. It was completely up to her. This is what the final prototype of that looked like. It's stitched with purple stitching because that was her favorite color, and the hearts. And then we had a lot of hands in class and glove patterns for the students to work with. We also got measurements from Sarah because her hands were a bit atrophied, so it was very individual, the sizing that had to happen with her. And this is a note from Sarah where she says that she likes them all, but my fave was the heart, which meant the sound, this one was the one that she was referring to. But she did actually keep quite a number of them. The other prototype that I showed that had the like purple and pink Cosmo that she really loved a lot, that was triggered by the index finger. And I think I'm going to end it at that because I'm at 10 minutes, right? Okay, there's so much more work that I would like to show you because also just to briefly mention, this class only worked with one girl, but it really sparked me to open this up, to use this as a format for the next semester that I taught as well, which I actually just ended last May. So this was in 2016, and for my 2017, I did the same thing, but we actually ended up going to a local community, a learning center for people with cerebral palsy. And they worked with more of the participants there. And so they were able to go and test their prototypes whenever they liked, and I think the students had a little bit more of a opportunity there for like conversation and really getting to know them and designing them. I know I want to show you guys a lot more, but I have a lot more photos, and I would love to share with anyone too who's interested. So please come up to me afterwards, and I'd be happy to show you some of the more projects that we worked on. Thanks.
I haven't asked the participants this, but I'm assuming it's okay that you'll all put your slides on the website, including things that you may have not talked about. So if you want to see those, they'll be up in the next little bit.
Do you need some? Yeah. She's going to do it. Oh, you don't need that?
Maybe you can turn it off. Because of the noise. Or is it projector?
Yeah, it's the projector. Yeah, it's fine.
Hello, I'm Anna, and I'm based in Munich, and I teach at the LMU University and teach e-textiles. I just want to give you an overview about my background a bit louder. So I've been, the format I will always prefer it. I will always be giving courses where we went out in the end with the students into the real world. Mainly to children who either went to school or a community center or public library, and kind of try to explore the concepts. So students would develop workshops and then test them with kids and share the work. And yeah, we set up a collaboration actually with an organization in Munich, which is engaging, kind of trying to do creative learning beyond the school. So they normally do, so I used to work for them as well, do festivals and events in the middle of the city and schools, libraries. So we did this seminars as a joint project. or we would do an open air festival, a walk-in workshop for everybody to join and try out e-textiles. And it was all based on students' ideas and students' work. Yeah, we also kind of several years we went to one school and did workshops with children there, like a whole day thing or several days. And the kind of limitations of that, at some point I wanted to do more complex work with the students in the seminars, because at some point you just, if you're developing projects for children, they need to be really kind of simple and straightforward. So last term I was actually inspired by Lara's class a lot, because what Lara didn't say is that she put up a whole documentation online with kind of detailed course structure and tutorials. So that was a big inspiration for me, kind of, and also an excuse to do more interesting things with students, like more in-depth technically. Yeah, and the students, they are coming from, they are all BA Art and Multimedia students, so they're coming from artistic background and computer science, so they're not experienced in textiles in any way. And it was kind of a short course, so there was not that much time, and they had to choose from kind of 3 target groups for their projects. So they could either develop something for elderly people, visually impaired, or for refugees, because this is also a big topic in Munich. I think now it's kind of stopped, but we used to have a big wave of refugees, and there are many people who are involved and kind of work with refugee children. I have many friends in this area. So they were asked to identify a problem kind of, which is important to this specific target group, and kind of think of a solution, or just to raise awareness for a specific problem, and then to develop a prototype for that. So we didn't have a specific person, as in Lara's project, to address, but there were kind of, one of the conditions was to seek feedback from the chosen groups. So they had to go out on their own and kind of find a way to talk to people relevant for the research. And another very important aspect for the project was to document everything properly. So I really wanted to open everything up, inspired by Lara again. So the students documented all their projects on our website, and there's a whole lesson plan as well. And they committed to publishing a tutorial, so that you're kind of meant to be able to rebuild the projects they've been working on. So I just want to show you the outcomes briefly. There were 4 groups in the end. One of them focused on visually impaired people, and they made this color recognition glove for people, which translated the colors, specific colors and specific sounds. So at first they, and this also came out of discussions. They went online on a forum for blind people and kind of tried to test out their ideas. And because initially I think they were making this for like everyday things like shopping, but then these discussions helped them realize, oh, maybe we could use it for artistic purposes. So like if you're in a gallery space, you kind of create a soundscape of a picture if you can't kind of perceive the visual part. So they were experimenting with sounds and different colors. And yeah, this is part of the schematics. So everything can be found on the website, and it's all kind of thoroughly documented. Another project was dealing with elderly people. So this group found out that elderly fall down very often and break something. That's a common problem. But also that they feel lonely quite often. So they designed this kind of brooch for, like, they were also thinking of a more kind of masculine design, but the first prototype was kind of the grandma style, with a flower with different buttons. And it also had, like, the buttons were symbols for different, for this box, which was kind of meant to be at home of your family, of kind of this elderly person, relatives, and it kind of encoded different messages. So I think the heart means please call me because I feel lonely, or I think the first thing is a piece of meat and means I've cooked something. No, I've cooked something. Come to my house. And the bow means can you go for grocery shopping for me? And I think the last one was for emergency. And they also integrated a tilt sensor. This was for if in case they fall on the ground, and it would trigger an alarm. And they also got in touch with their grandmas for this and found out that they actually prefer clickable buttons. So that was kind of a funny step back, because we think, oh, e-textiles is a nice tactile answer, but they actually found out they like this feedback clicking, so they integrated push buttons on, what do you call it in English? No, the material. No, it's not felt, this rubbery thing.
Neoprene? No.
No.
So what is it?
Like
again?
plastic foam.
More school.
Plastic foam.
It's like rubbery thing. You know what you stick in the bathroom? But yeah, anyway.
Vinyl?
No.
More scrutiny?
Tinkering, yeah. Yeah, and this is also the breakdown of what they did, but they funnily, because they all did sketching with hardware course before this course, they all kind of worked rather with hard electronics, but this actually allowed them to pack everything tightly, because if you see, the brooch is very compact.
Oh, sorry.
And this group made a project for refugee children learning German, kind of as a learning aid. They designed a sleeve which has different cards, kind of leather cards you can snap on it, and they connected it to a computer game. So you would have, you would see an animal on the screen, and you would need to answer the question and pick the right card. They had like a variety of animals, and they made, for example, the wine with a stroke sensor. And then if you clip the right animal on your sleeve, the animal would appear. And if you kind of, for example, with the line, if you kind of stroke it, it will be happy, and smiley, and you would see there were hearts floating everywhere. So they were looking for this playful approach for children with the means of e-textiles. And the last group made a badge for blind people, which lit up in dark. So yeah, they were experimenting a lot how to isolate light properly. And the important aspect of the seminar was to go out in the end, because we didn't do public workshops for the final thing. I decided to organize like a meet-up at the Fab Lab, and we kind of invited everyone to join us for this discussion, which was also nice for the students kind of to pack up their, kind of to sum up their work and to present them in an insecure environment, kind of to go out there. So we were kind of channeling the sharing of our work in both online and offline, and trying to engage local people, but also to push this kind of DIY understanding of e-textiles. Because what I find in Munich mainly is, this approach coming from startups which are doing hashtag and kind of making e-textiles look very fancy and kind of very clean. And I just wanted to show this other perspective with DIY style, cheap electronics, cheap materials, where you can make something for yourself, for your own needs. So yeah, this is the website, and I'm gonna post the link online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was an incredible round of presentations. I'm going to move my chair a little bit just so I don't have to stand up and sort of be the leader. So we can 10 minutes. Okay. Oh yeah, let me run tables. So we have about 10 minutes for a discussion. Which we could definitely talk about this for an extremely long time. It's super interesting work. I think I'll go off script a little bit to adjust for time. So I'll just ask one question.
In front?
Yeah, come on. Yeah. Come hang out. This is summer camp, or this is summer fest. Yeah. Come on.
We don't buy it.
Let's just open up to questions. I mean, I just gotta say, I'm super, the things that were running through my mind is just sort of this is the humanity in our work. Hearing you talk about, Sarah, both of your students, this is, it's really bringing the people back in, empowerment, agency, and so on that note, agency, empowerment, ask questions. Let's open it up.
Oh yeah, sorry, no, go ahead.
No, Laura, in fact for you, but for everybody, can you reflect on the fact that the wearable that was preferred by the person using it was the analog one? And was that because of graphic placement, or was it actually because of the functionality?
It was the functionality of it. It was, she did also enjoy the prototypes that were able to trigger sound, but I think that the analog one was easy to use right off the bat. It wasn't something that needed testing and iteration, so I think it was just really satisfying, right out of the box. She, it also helped her with something that she had also specifically come and asked us for, which is for writing and for painting, which she really enjoyed, but she always needed assistance from her mother for. Yeah. And then I was also gonna propose something, because when I was asked to do this panel, and the title of it, Social E-Textiles, I was almost I'm not sure if what I have to offer right now, or at least what I was thinking of, is so social, because I think of a bigger community, and my class designed for one, and then they designed, and then we did open it up, and they actually got to meet a bigger community. But I was curious as to what you all think of social e-textiles being. Yeah.
Sociologists have made that challenge real easy now, because they talk about microsociality. And in this case, I think for your project, the microsocialities were in the collaborating people in the class who were looking at each other's projects, differentiating projects. That's the dynamic, that's the sociality. Even though there's one person in support, there's still a community that's forming around solving this problem.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because it forms so differently. In a way, there are so many people who are neglected by the macro sociality of large companies imagining
Right.
millions of things, and you're imagining one thing.
Right.
And so sociologists have noticed this going on with makerspaces, and also they have to find a way, somewhere between anthropology and sociology, to deal with this sort of temporary tribe that forms to solve the problem.
Yeah, yeah, and I was even, thinking like what the students then take with them to the outside world too, because just working with people who are taking off the shelf things that aren't made specifically for them. So I thought that was, I think that's a really good point, because they were making one-offs that were very like suited to an individual's needs, but they had been kind of left out of like a mass marketed product design.
I think also the point of problem solving gets like a really different depth, because like especially in industrial design or design studies, we learn to problem solve things that are like products and somebody wants to make money out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's really helping somebody, and maybe it needs also a certain possibility or options to individualize for the single person that need it. And for me personally, it's also more interesting to like invest work in that kind of products or projects instead of making just the next well-being thing that, whatever, tracks your yoga classes, which is also nice, but it's, it's more a consumer product then, and not really a product solving for a certain problem. Situation.
I once read this article from Microsoft that what you see, like the same with your tracking, it's like general for the general public, but they were really like designing for disability, because if you design for disability, then we will come up with new features for people who are not disabled, and which they can use in a different way. And I think the problem with what we have now a lot with technology is that we try to make for a mass market, because everyone wants to have their iPhone in a wearable, and that's not going to be the future, I think. And so by looking at things like you're doing, or designing really like for problems, or I think then we will come up with the future of e-textile, fashion tech, whatever you want to call it.
I really like the examples that you all showed. I wonder how delicate are. In my lived experience, the things that I make, some tend to break more easily than others. Especially if you make something that someone with a disability really loves and helps him or her, then he cannot repair this thing once it's broken. So do you also educate the caretakers to fix what's broken? Is it part of what you're doing?
I think I can start on that. So, I guess with my example, with my research project, it's been my participants making their own technology, and already we've had some things breaking, which is quite interesting. But I think, because they sort of went through and they made the whole process themselves, they do understand how to fix it, and they've had to make a couple of little fixes themselves. But I'm at the point with these studies where I'm doing follow-up interviews, and I exhibited the work in an exhibition here, so already when I go on to pick it up, I'm like, oh, can you have a look at this? And this is a bit of a problem. It's a bit of an issue. One participant already recorded over one of the devices, some of the glue came off, and it's something which I'm always trying to figure out how do we solve. So I think for me, with my project, it's quite lovely because I'm still working with them, but I'm going to have to try and think about, okay, how do we solve problems in the future? But for me, it's very much about trying them. It's been about working with them to build with themselves, so hopefully they can do that and have longevity with it. And one reason we chose not to snip off the recordable buttons on the little circuit boards was so that they could use them again in the future, but that's backfired because one of the participants has already recorded over it.
Yep.
So it's interesting. I don't really have an answer, it's more of a comment, I guess.
So the prototypes that went to Sarah, I had a woman on the other side who knew about electronics, so she was my helper there.
Okay. She was also one of the people who took care of Sarah.
Not took care of, but she had been working with Sarah for some time. Well, she had been teaching Sarah herself, because she's part of a nonprofit and she teaches electronics to youth. And so she had been working with Sarah in that capacity, or she'd also been researching how to help Sarah as well with interfaces. So there were projects that were given openly to her and Sarah and her family to develop. So I had the luxury of that. But her mother was not educated, but I think that's an important point. And the second round that we did, they did not give them to the people, which I'm having a little bit of trouble with, because I would like for it to be continuation. Like when the semester ends, I don't want the development to stop there. But right now, but that is what happened last semester. And I would like to have a follow-up with that, with the learning center that they were designing for, but I'm still working on how to make it more long-term.
I mean, it's a problem with teaching in general. Like things are so unstable and breakable. But in a kind of in a university environment, it's actually quite nice when things don't work out.
I think it's crucial for university environments to.
Yeah, totally. Like I mean, although students feel immediately kind of frustrated, but then they kind of get to do it. So if you're setting out something which should be kind of adjustable by the people themselves somehow, then it's actually, it could be quite nice because it contributes to the learning effect.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not suitable for your project because obviously Sarah cannot fix things herself, but I mean, it's part of learning process. So it's actually essential to have broken things.
Well, one of the first steps could perhaps be that you provide how do you call it, the drawings that were used to make this product, and this, perhaps the schematics or the software that runs on this thing. That could give them a bit of a start in learning and understanding how it works.
I mean, right, e-textiles are not the most robust, right? We all know that. So, but we're all trying to improve aspects of that. So hopefully that will also go further. And I think having someone who is not the person who is not the user themselves, because they might not be able to fix it, I think is fine too. But those don't really. But it's a specialized field now. So maybe in the future there will be more. We're like prepared.
So we actually only have time for about one more question, unfortunately.
Well, I was going to throw in one that would maybe wrap it all up anyway, because there's been some discussion about scalability of some of these ideas, and there's obviously like different opinions about how you should approach that. Is there anything that you've learned working with very small target groups, and particularly users through participatory design or through working with very specific conditions that has I don't know, that you've learned from that you can potentially use to address the scalability issue and
So I guess, one output I've kind of put on my aim to my PhD is to very much create a resource for the researchers or educators or designers working with similar user groups, and that's been inspired by the charities I think who have done some of the things working with, I guess, harder to reach groups. I kind of have, I guess, initial findings I'm kind of analysing right now from the workshops. Certain things are not that accessible, or people do not love so much. So the finger knitting was not enjoyed so much, partly because I didn't explain about what to begin with, and then the fellows and the participants got bored, so stuff like that. But very much looking at maybe ways of approaching making certain components, as specific buttons or stuff like this. And for me, that kind of maybe ups the scalability, so other people can carry on this work and build on it. So it's more of a social scalability, I guess.
Yeah, I think creating a toolkit, an online toolkit would be quite nice. I would love to get, speaking financially, I would love to get a grant for this stuff so I could actually get a small group together and dedicate more time and thinking into how to make it more scalability, because I feel like it's still very much stuck in the educational format right now for me, and I'm just now starting to think about how to scale it up. So maybe I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it, because the moment you talk about scalability, it's a completely different approach and kind of mindset. And I kind of, for the teaching purposes, I was telling students, don't bother about kind of other projects on the market, we're not interested in that for the course. So I don't know, I'm kind of in an inner conflict, because yes, you want to change, kind of affect many people and change everything for the best. on the other hand, you would be going into a completely different direction. I don't know.
Yeah, and I really like the one-offs that the students are making for the people they're designing for. But I think that you could also create some sort of modular toolkit that perhaps people could take a piece here and a piece there and then create something for themselves too. And I think that's an option. But I really appreciate just the one existing for the one user, the one object for the one user.
I think what is really nice with the way when it's not scaled up is like when it comes to like applications for therapy use cases, and it's really difficult to bring them to the market because there's so many. I don't know. It comes to like which case of therapy it is, but it's like super difficult about like all has safety aspects, hygienic aspects, whatever. So in a way, it's nice to teach people to do stuff, or like to really keep it on a level where you don't have to get into all of this trouble because it's quite a lot. I don't know if you know about the snoozelen spaces. It's like it comes from Holland, I think from the 70s, but people created a space to give like a free time off-time experience for handicapped people. Like it's a lot about the experience of like sounds and light and visions. Like, and it's e-textile's actually nice material for it, but I know just one shop selling things for that, and it's basically like disco balls and things that are really already approved. And I think it's very like they started to have that in kindergartens too, because it's also even in some big companies for stressed people to relax. So it's kind of in this in-between space. It's maybe possible to just use what is a nice application, and I think it's good to keep it there. You have a lot of trouble bringing it into hospitals.
But we're not allowed to use it directly, because one of the projects that I did, I had people coming over like, oh, this is fantastic for snoozeling. I didn't know what it was, so I learned about that. We had a test case, but we did it like not officially. So you officially have to ask the parents if they're okay, and there's like many ways, and that's just for testing.
But you could give it like as in the case with Sarah, it's like one pair of parents you can talk to and ask if it's okay.
Yeah, but officially you would, in the Netherlands, you would need to have, I mean, we did it also if not officially, because I wanted to test it and she was very eager to, but if you really want to do, you have to have all these regulations, and that's why for example, Philips is working a lot on this area, but they're not putting things on the market in the Netherlands because it has different kind of rules and regulations. And so, for example, they go to Germany because it's more easy.
Yeah, I think this in-between space, that if you sell it to a private person, you can agree on something, and then you have your own kind of...
No, you can't, because there's like laws from the government.
Yeah, okay, so
which
this
is
different in the different countries.
Yeah.
So,
sorry.
I'm going to have to, it's a super interesting conversation, and I think it's great that this has stimulated so many questions. Like, I actually have 1,000 questions as well. But unfortunately, we have to leave it here. So we can take the conversation out. Biscuits and tea. Biscuits and tea for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then come back for the next panel, which I believe is the history of computing.
Yes, computing and textiles.
Computing and textiles, which is going to be also really exciting. You should come back. So thank you.
I couldn't find the most probably.
Yeah. Me too, and I'm trying to see this guy.
It's different from here because the echo is so weird.
What are the community centers? That's the community centre or the shop?
No, it's just like the idea of it. And you have a kind of association or like it's kind of competitive.
Snoozely. No,
but it's like
Snoozling is the general term.
I guess snoozely.
Snoozling is also a name.
Like a small, like a cottage